Get ready for an electrifying night of classical music as the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra presents Prokofiev's prowess. Guest pianist Ilya Yakushev brings fire and energy to Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 3. The night opens with the graceful wit of Mozart's Symphony No. 27 and closes with Bizet's joyful Symphony in C. Join the WCO on Friday, January 30th at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are available at wcoconcerts.org/Prokofiev. Want to win the Madison Summer Camp Rush? Behold Wonder Palette Camp. The local creative art camp in Middleton at Sauk Trail Elementary is open for registration. Campers ages 6 to 12 will find an energetic and supportive environment to explore their creative passions. They offer 4 separate weeks of camp, each unique, and each week has 4 days of fun in the culinary arts, arts and crafts, theater, and dance. Register today at wonderpaletecamp.com. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, we're taking a walk on the wild side and exploring Madison's kink scene. What do these spaces look like, and how do you participate? That is, if you fancy, of course. You may not know, but Madison has a rich and charted history as a safe and unique city for the kinky, and a pretty vibrant present. So we're bringing back my conversation with local performance artist and consent advocate Lily Lux. We demystify the scene and debunk misconceptions about what is and isn't kink. And before we get started, I should say, this is an adult conversation. So if you are around young ears, you may want to fire up this episode at a later point. We do also cover sensitive topics, including sexual trauma. So please take care while listening. All right, here we go. Hey, Lily.
Hello, Bianca.
Welcome back to the show. We're so happy to have you.
I'm so excited to talk about this topic.
So tell us briefly, what's your connection to Madison's kink community, and how did you get interested and started in the scene?
Sure. So when I came out in 2010, I started, going out to Plan B and different clubs and getting out there. And I had heard about this amazing place called the Inferno nightclub and this amazing party called Leather and Lace that's been happening in the city forever. And it was sort of like this very dark, mysterious, sexy party. And I was like, yeah, I'm into that. And I went, and eventually I started performing at the Inferno, and then I was producing shows. And then I was, doing the backstage shows at Leather and Lace. And I've been the host of Fetish Night at the Cardinal for the last decade. So once I basically stepped into the scene and ripped my pants off at the first party I went to, I was hooked. I was there, and I've been doing it for about 14 years.
How would you define kink typically in the Madison scene?
Kink in general is anything that's sort of seen as outside, the social norms of sex. Kink in and of itself doesn't actually have to involve sex at all. BDSM is commonly used also as an acronym for it, which is bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, and sadomasochism. So those are sort of, the different areas. Kink for me is just really about it could be about a power exchange. I kind of look at it as play. People can call them scenes. And it's really just about sort of having the freedom to say, hey, I think I'm into this. Let's explore it. I've definitely tried things and been never again. And I've tried things and been that's my new favorite. I had no idea I would like that. So it really just offers a way for you to openly, consensually find things that you maybe have, as far as our society has put a lot of shame and been no, that's disgusting, or we don't want to engage in those things. And, it's actually very thrilling and a lot of joy. It's not so much dark and scary. I really find kink to be a joyful experience.
Yeah, and I find it really interesting, as someone who's not as close to the community, but in and around it, being in Madison, about the kink isn't always necessarily sex, So are you saying it can be just a form of play and interaction? I think maybe that would be less familiar to folks who aren't, in the scene.
Yeah, no, I mean, kink actually, as far as a lot of the parties and things that we engage in Madison, I actually, we're not allowed to engage in sex in a public place. So role play, rope, bondage, I'm sort of known for my spanking skills, like all of these different things that have nothing to do with genitalia or as in nothing to do with sex. Sometimes they involve instruments. Sometimes it can be just as much as a power exchange and control. So it can be so many things.
I'm so excited to be talking to you about this because I think it's an exciting opportunity to demystify the scene for folks who haven't been or maybe are curious about it or just maybe they don't even know they want to know, but they're going to know you're listening to this conversation. Because I imagine there are a lot of variations to what like a kink event could be. But if you could describe it, is there a typical night going out to a public event in Madison? What would you see? Like what's happening?
Sure. For the most part, a lot of our events are really just like sexy dance parties. So there's just like people maybe in corsets and collars, and there might be some toys or things like that. But for the most part, it's just really great music, drinks. It's really just a place for people who want the community, who wants to engage or learn more about these things to meet. And then a lot more things can happen after that. But as far as going to a venue, I've been a long time promoter and event host. And when I meet a new person and I want to invite them to the event, they're just like, well, I don't want to do anything I don't want to do. And because that's what's portrayed in the media, like the scary dom and you'll do as I say. And that's not at all. Like kink fundamentally is about being safe, consent, and communication. So for the most part, it's just a really fun party, a chance for you to meet people, a chance for you to maybe wear something in public that you wouldn't normally think you'd feel comfortable in. It's a chance to maybe push a boundary for yourself or again, just freeing yourself of like, I'm only supposed to wear this and I'm only supposed to like this and I'm only supposed to hang out with these people. And yeah, it's just a chance to explore.
Yeah, and I've been to a leather and lace night at the Crucible, and it's one of those things you can be fully covered in the ways you want to be covered, or like a leather jacket, etc. And there were so many totally different outfits. I think I saw like a Pokemon, I saw someone in a Zorro outfit, someone furry, there's all just different things. And I love dressing up and I love that play. And I have to say, Madison, I see so many events like kink and fetish nights and that sort of thing. It feels like Madison is kind of unique in having that. Am I wrong about that sentiment?
Well, I mean, there are kink parties all around the world. There's even clubs that focus on that. But I think what's interesting about Madison is that we actually sort of have some public events. There's a lot of private events that involve like vetting and background checks, and we have those too here. But we have a really close community, and the history of places like the Hotel Washington and Five Nightclub does a lot of things now as well. But that used to be a place called Maneuvers. That was in the up north space downtown. For the Hotel Washington folks, like there was a bar called Backdoor, which eventually became Rod's. So there's just been all of these different things.
Let's pause and talk about Hotel Washington.
Yeah.
Because when I heard about, I did not get to experience Hotel Washington. When I heard about it, I'm like, wait, what? A hotel that had multiple gay bars in it that of all different flavors and styles. Can you like talk a little bit more about that for those who are just like, I've literally never heard about this?
It was on West Washington. It burned down, I want to say in 96 is the year. And it was just, there was like restaurant and a barbershop and a leather bar. And it honestly to me is like the dreamscape of someone who's managed venues of just being like, it's a little bit of everything. So it was just a really open and amazing space. I unfortunately, like I graduated high school in 98, so I wasn't able to attend, but I have heard so many fantastically fun and freaky stories from that place that I am extremely jealous that I never got to attend. But I think that really started the openness in our community. It's 2025 now, and people were engaging in public settings, and there were videos being played at Maneuvers. And it's kind of weird to think that in Wisconsin, like it was still illegal to be gay in like the early 80s. And so that these places were putting that out there. And Fetish Night at the Cardinal just celebrated its 30th anniversary. So, I mean, it has a really long history in Madison. And I know we're just like a sexy city. Like King Street and Main Street used to be like basically strip clubs and brothels in the 70s and 80s, which is hard for me to imagine as someone who frequents those bars down there. And I'm kind of jealous it still isn't happening.
Yeah, and that's something for folks if you don't like work there or, really frequent downtown on that side of the Capitol. I wouldn't have known that. And that it was like it was a red light districty vibe and brothels, and prostitution and all of that. And now it's kind of like upscale boutique spots. But Notchville, which I used to work at, like it's got all that red lighting. And I always heard rumors that, yeah, this was once a brothel, by the way. And I'm like, well, that tracks.
Yeah. We're also a university town, so generally speaking, educated people are more open to outside of the normative rules of society and exploring and having things like open communication and not so much shame or fear surrounding, sexuality, because again, they've done work around that. A lot of university cities generally have a larger like swinger or poly population.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, talking about the history is like Madison is historically kinky. It's historically sexy.
It really is.
And in these spaces, when it wasn't nearly as accepted as it is now to be queer or to be engaging in different sorts of play, that, Hotel Washington had a bar that you could like go through the back steps. Like you can go in through the straight club, but then go and be like safe without being spotted or that sort of thing, like making those spaces, I don't know, like 30 years ago. And now, I mean, there's Woofs still on King Street, which has got, some of that vibe.
It's definitely a bear bar for sure.
Yeah.
And I do want to make a point because there is a lot of history connecting kink and the LGBTQ plus community. Obviously, there are some connections there, but just because you're queer does not correlate to being kinky. So while there is a lot of connection, I know that there are some in my community that are very like, I'm not into that. And that's fine. So let's just make that distinction for everybody.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you did. And I explicitly wanted to ask you, what is that connection? Why do you think that there's a connection there?
Again, as like when you come out, as I'll just speak to my own experience, is like you've decided to acknowledge that maybe something that you were told was shameful or not okay. You've decided on a fundamental level, this is who I am. This is who I like. This is the kind of sex I want to engage in. And so you've already crossed that threshold of being like, I'm queer or I'm, whatever it is that you identify as. And so you've already sort of taken that one step out the door. And then sex and obviously a lot of the non-sexual acts that we engage in are so varied and can be really out there. And it's like the sky's the limit for what you may find that you're into. But because you've already taken that step out of the heteronormative, monogamous, potentially world, you're open to trying new things.
I do want to talk about like the current scene, like what's happening today and where are the kink community spots where people frequent and there are events that can be attended.
Well, obviously, we have touched on some of them. So Crucible, which is a great club in Madison, filled the hole that the Inferno left for many of us. And so while after the Inferno closed, we took Leather and Lace to Plan B, and then it was at Prism. And then when that closed, it then moved on to Crucible, which is a great fit for it. And Crucible, besides hosting Leather and Lace, which has been going on in the city, I want to say 27 years, so a long time, also has events like Deviance, which is a play event that's every fourth Friday. They also have a Sensation event. They have a furry event like they do quarterly. So they also do like burlesque and other things, which is honestly sort of how once I started doing burlesque, I sort of then ended up doing kink shows as just sort of an evolution from that. Five Nightclub, like I said, who has a part of that long history in Madison, has the barracks. And while drag shows aren't at all necessarily involve kink, there might be a performer who decides to highlight the more flamboyant side of those things. There's also a great place if you're into exploring rope and bondage. There's a place called Bay 6, which is basically a community meeting space where you can learn about shibari. And yeah, so shibari is sort of based on the term kimbaku, it's a Japanese term for the beauty of tight binding. So actually rope suspensions is like, I didn't think that would be something I would be into, but rope bondage is such a beautiful art form. And Basics does like classes. They also have parties around sort of focused on rope, but other aspects of kink as well. But it's a great meeting place to learn and find community.
We've done a good job of talking about like the public spaces. You mentioned there's also private events and parties. What other kinds of ways does the kink community connect in Madison?
Sure. So, an international term commonly used is things called munches. So, it's a way for our community to meet up. You know, you're not going to wear your corsets and leather boots, etc. It's, it might be at a coffee shop or a restaurant or a bar, and it's just a place for you to meet folks. And meeting folks and being vetted is a big part of being able to go to sort of the next level of parties in Madison, which are the private parties, which is where we do get to do the stuff that we can't do in public. So,
Such as?
oh my God, this is edited for content. So I'll just say probably everything you imagined it would be and more. So it's, you're able to have more nudity, actually engage in sexual acts because, again, you're not in a public space. But any of those events that we have, and there are several monthly events, and obviously just people who decide to host a party, generally has a vetting process, which is why the munches are really good. You sort of need to start to meet the community, be a part of it. Some of them, actually, most of the private parties have like background check aspects. We want to make sure we're keeping our community safe, because the overarching theme for all of our community events is creating safe spaces. So there's a lot of work that goes into making sure a place will be safe. It's always interesting having a party in a bar where I'm like, yep, let's wear underwear and run around. So there's a lot of work put into in order to
It's not willy-nilly.
yeah, it's not willy-nilly. It's about creating a space we sort of keep each other safe. Most of even our public events, we have rules as you walk in the door, like you're not allowed to take photography. We don't want to out anybody. Consent, making sure that there's communication and all of those things that go in there. If you see something, say something. We have DMs, dungeon masters, who are generally either wearing like an armband or some sort of identification, whether it's security or whatnot. If you have an issue, we want to know about it. We can't see everything when there's hundreds of people in a club, but we are generally sort of like self-policing in that, because the whole idea is to create community and create a space that is welcoming to all. You all sort of, as you walk in that door, have basically agreed to look out for each other and to care for each other and to communicate. And so for me, and most of the work that I did as an event host and promoter, even outside of the kink world, like I wanted to bring consent forward conversations into non-kink events, because I was just like tired of being harassed and groped and, all of those things that happen to people in spaces where alcohol is being poured. And I think it's a really important aspect of creating community in here in Madison.
Yeah, because you are not just someone who's been at throwing the events. You're a participant.
Yeah.
You are actually test riding the experience. But we're talking about something super important. You said really these spaces are built on consent and safety. And there are so many takes and perceptions about this community that I'm sure folks listening right now might even be like, wow, they're talking about this. This isn't something you talk about publicly. This is private. And that's also, there's a lot of ignorance around the community and even misconceptions that are downright pretty negative, vilifying kink community and just representations in popular media. Books like 50 Shades of Grey can depict kink in ways that is dangerous, or even abusive. What do you make of that reality?
Yeah, I'll touch on that in a sec. But one of the things that you said about not talking about it, I really want to sort of imagine what would our world look like if we did actually talk about sex, if we did actually not have so much fear and shame. And like, there's so much personal turmoil that people experience and have almost mental health issues about, I really need to say this thing that I feel that I need. And they could spend a lifetime suppressing that. And then how freeing that can be to actually let that go and communicate that. And sometimes, when I've been hosting and I realize that I'm the first and potentially only person that sometimes, people share with me those things. And it's such a gift to sort of let that go. Going to like the how the world has perceived it and things like 50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey is not a kink story. It's an abuse story. And what's hard for me about that is that, yes, there are kink acts definitely depicted, the dominant submissive sort of storyline, but anything that is involving stalking or pushing past the boundaries and not following safe words or a multitude. I've actually never read the books because I've heard how not on par they are, but these are the things I've generally heard that they definitely got wrong. I do like that it sort of exposed a lot of people to the idea of engaging in acts and power exchanges such as this, but there's a couple big things around sort of kink communication. And there's safe, sane, and consensual, or another term called RAC, which is risk aware consensual kink. And the idea is that kink needs to be talked about safety. You need to talk about consent. And so it's really just the idea that there is some aspect of personal responsibility for both, like all parties, being informed, communication, etc. So if you're engaging in some of these, kink scenes, play, however it is you want to word it, if you're not having a discussion beforehand and communicating, your boundaries and limits, just because you gave consent doesn't mean you can't withdraw consent. Consent can be withdrawn at any moment, at any time. Just because it was given before doesn't mean it's like carte blanche. And also, especially if you've been doing impact play, etc., aftercare is extremely important. You need to have that sort of relaxation come down and make sure that you're taking care of each other as far as the potential physical and psychological effects of engaging in certain acts, for sure. And then debriefing. So afterwards, you talk about it, like what worked for you, what didn't. And if you're engaging in kink acts, but not having any of those other things, you're engaging in an abuse situation because it should have all of those things in there.
So many powerful points that you just shared, and just grateful for that distinction.
Yeah. A lot of people would be like, oh, I like the idea of being choked. That's great. Choking people, however, can be extremely dangerous. You can kill someone through strangulation. And so you should be doing some sort of education and definitely having some sort of communication of this is how much I'm comfortable with. It needs to be a discussion, and you need to do some education around the safety of that. You can't just grab someone's neck and be like, I'm going to hold it for as long as I want to, as hard as I want to. That is not okay. That is not okay.
So talking about some community standards and engaging in consent. I'm grateful too that you brought up like the psychological impacts that this could have and being thoughtful of that. I understand that some folks engage in kink for specific purposes to heal trauma. Can you talk about that?
Again, I can sort of use a personal story so I don't just put it out there for everyone, but like I have a sexual trauma story. And so it's hard for me sometimes to work past in like sexuality of getting through that moment. But what I love about the kink environment is that it's so about communication. It's so about consent. So something that if I wasn't engaging in that act in that way, I would honestly be traumatized by it. But because I feel safe and I'm trusting this person or they're trusting me, I actually am able to let go and work through things that otherwise would tend to be harmful to me. And that's not everyone. Not everyone engages in kink because they have something to get over or work through. There's tons of studies out there that say this is a very valid way because of such the construct around it, building communication and trust and care. It's really about caring, which is odd as I'm like beating people's butts to a pulp. But I care so much about your butt.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you do carry that trauma, but then also really heartened that you found this tool that is offering some space to heal.
Yeah, I mean, when I walked into my first event and I saw the kink show going on, I actually kind of like looked away. I was like, is this happening? Is this going on? And what is this? I was really also surprised that it was happening in Madison. I was like, all this time I could have been doing, but it's very, again, just freeing and crazy what people can do, honestly, with their bodies. You really sort of learn what the human body is capable of. I remember the first time I saw a flesh hook suspension. So people are literally hung with hooks through their body. Not my jam, but I'm not here to yuck on someone's yum. But it was just amazing that what our bodies can do. And honestly, for some people, kink exploration is sort of pushing that boundary of like, how much can I stretch that? Or, how much can I push myself to? And it's fascinating and interesting and happy. Like, I don't know.
I've definitely done some reading about performance art and acting and stepping into a role and what that can do for transforming certain states of being that you might be stuck in. Man, this is gorgeous. Before we wrap, this has been such a insightful, beautiful conversation. And I want to end on that note as well, because I know kink gets some shade, but there are a lot of benefits like the one you just described. What do you think the top benefits of engaging in kink can have for folks?
I enjoy that one of the words that is often used in kink is like, let's play. Let's play together. And kink is fun. Yes, it can be dark and dreary if that's where you want to take it. And that's how you might decide the role or scene for you is. But realistically, it's just fun to engage in games and role play and fantasy. I mean, how much joy would it bring you to actually do the thing you've been fantasizing about for however long? But even the dark stuff can be like fun and stuff too. I don't want to be like, just because it's dark and dreary, it's not fun. It is. But I just really can't say enough about the thrilling happiness and just freedom. I feel like kink and freedom are so intertwined. And if you are going to come out to Madison events, I think a lot of people, like we talked about, have this preconceived notion. It's really they're just fun parties where you get to dress up and dance around and you might meet someone or see something, but that's great. And you can either watch it or not, or participate or not. I mean, there's a thing called exhibitionism and voyeurism. Like, you can just sit there and enjoy it. It's the best people watching. That's what I'll say about our parties. It is the best people watching opportunity in the city at any time.
I can attest. Lily, you are wonderful. This is such a pleasure. And thank you for coming on to help give folks an idea of what's going on in the kink scene, demystifying some things, and bringing joy to us on CityCast and those listening.
Thank you.
That's Lily Lux, local performance artist and consent advocate. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm your host, Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with someone who's got an adventurous side? Alrighty, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care.